Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we're going to do the first book in a series, but each one of the books can also be read as standalones as well. So that's how we're going to do this one. The name of this series is called My Mostly. It's a funny romance series, and the book review that we're going to do today is for My Mostly Secret Baby, and it's by Penelope Bloom. We meet Damon Rose, and we find out that he's a sports agent. He also has a brother who is a professional football player. He's a quarterback. His name's Chris, and he gets into all types of trouble. He's a problem. So he has been trying to keep his brother out of some stuff, and he's on his way inside when he sees a small child. They have this red balloon, and the little girl, she let go of it, and it's about to get away. He's in a position that he could have reached up and grabbed it. He decides, no, she needs to be taught a lesson. And so he doesn't grab the balloon. The mother comes over. She's ranting at him. He takes out his wallet. He gives the little girl a couple of bucks. And he's like, now you can go buy her another one. But this time she needs to learn how to hold on to things. The mother just got even more pissed off, but the little girl was happy. She's like, oh, we can go buy a car now. Well, then there's also someone else who saw this whole interaction go down. It's a woman. He says she looks like a tennis player. She's dressed. She has a racket bag. And she, of course, is like, you are such an asshole for that. Like, why couldn't you just reach up and get the little girl's balloon? And he tells her the same thing. She needs to learn a lesson. So they're going back and forth. And he's intrigued because she's not like bowing down to him, you know. Everything he says riles her up even more. And he then tells her that he's basically going to go and badmouth her to the other agents. So she won't be able to get representation. And she's like, oh, no, you won't. I'm just going to keep my eye on you. So she follows him into the Marriott. Now, this meeting is supposed to be with Olympic officials. He's trying to get football into the Olympics. And of course, if he's not able to do that, he hopes he can at least maybe poach some players from some of these other agents. So one way or another, he plans to try and make it a successful meeting. But she stays on him. And the actual room number is listed in his phone, but he won't look down in his phone to look at it. So he's just walking, and he's, of course, telling her, stop following me. She's like, nope, I'm keeping my eye on you before you try and put anything bad out there about me. And then, of course, they get to some door. He doesn't know what door he's going in. He's just opening a door, and they both wind up falling through. We then switch to Chelsea's POV, and you know your girl loves when they do that. So when they fell in the office, it was because she had her shoulder against the door as he opened it, and so thus the reason all this force, and they both just fell. So then they start looking at each other in this really intense way. And before they know it, they're kissing. She's stubborn, like bad, like to the point where she is going to prove her point no matter what. She'll go to the ends of the earth to do it. And so she describes in her, like, all these different times, she's saying this in her head, all the times in her childhood where she would do stupid stuff that got her really hurt, But she was just determined. We find out that she's never had a guy actually make her orgasm. And so now her determination is to let him fuck her and have him look at her face while she never comes. This is what she is committed to. Like, oh my gosh. The first thing he does is he starts eating her pussy. And that drives her absolutely wild, but she is still not making a sound. She is not moaning, nothing. She is determined. Like, I'm not going to do it. So then he pulls out the condom. He starts to screw her. And before she can stop herself, she says, "Oh my God, yes." And then he comes not too long after. He doesn't make a noise either, but the way he tightens her hands, she knows that's what happened. So then afterwards, he took the condom off, threw it away, pulled his pants up, and he left. Well, right before he left, she was like, "You're just gonna leave," and he's like, "I don't do relationships. I don't have the time." So she, of course, is thinking in her head like, "Why did I even say anything? You know, it's not like I care that he's gonna leave. You know." She then winds up falling to the floor because yeah, this was a hard fuck against the wall, and she feels something come out of her, and she's like, "I can't still be wet, you know." Well, then a piece of condom comes out, and then some nut. So he came inside of her because the condom broke. And she thinks back to her ovulation. She's like, okay, I'm not ovulating, so I can't get pregnant. I should be good. And she doesn't like Plan B because of what they can do to you. So she's thinking biology's on her side. But we all know where this is going. We switch back to Damon, and he finally finds Chris, who's with some woman. And of course, Chris is like, okay, normally you would have been in the meeting, but you're like running 30 minutes late. So what's going on? And then he's like, you smell like pussy. He doesn't say anything. They go into this meeting, and as they were about to come up, Chelsea's coming up, and she barges in with them. He's like, what are you doing here? She's like, I figured you'd be coming to this meeting, so I figured I'd come. So she comes in, and he's thinking like, oh my gosh, she used me just to get into this meeting. And it kind of bothered him, and he didn't understand why it bothered him. So then with all these other agents in there, you know, they're all looking at her kind of crazy. And the woman's like, you know, that's heading up the meeting, like, you're not supposed to be here. Because she had yelled out her name was Chelsea Cross. And the woman's like, you're not supposed to be here. She's like, you can either leave on your own or I'll call security. Chelsea goes, call security. He says something to her, and she winds up saying, like, letting the cat out of the bag that they had just screwed. They go outside. She's about to tell him about the broken condom. And he told her how she needed to leave and all this type of stuff. So then she's like, just screw it. And she winds up leaving, and security takes her out. We fast forward 5 years, and Chelsea's in her car, and there is a child in the back seat. Her daughter's name is Luna. She has dark hair and blue eyes, just like her dad. And she's stubborn and bossy and feisty as well, which I think is a combination of both of them. She is taking her daughter over to her brother's to watch. His name's Grant. Apparently, her parents didn't really accept her having a kid, so the father not being in the life was a big deal to them, and so she doesn't really have a relationship with them. The brother, the way she describes him, like he's pale and stuff, seems like he might have a drug problem possibly, or had a drug problem. They didn't say, but that's kind of the way she describes him, kind of gives that thought. She's on her way to an interview. She is going to Rose Athletics Representatives, which is RAR, and she knows that this is Damon's, his company. So she's been working, you know, quite a few jobs. She also talks about how the dating is just not the greatest. She now has to date with purpose, and that can be a little difficult. So she does have an interview scheduled. So she goes up to the receptionist, and the guy that she was supposed to interview with is out today. And she's like, can't you just please let me interview with someone else? You know, all of a sudden the air in the room changes, and the receptionist stiffens a little bit, and she automatically knows Damon has entered the building. So Damon's on the phone going off on someone, and our girl Chelsea goes, if it isn't Lucifer himself. Everyone is shocked because no one talks to him like that. So he comes over to the receptionist desk, and she tells him what's going on. And so then he just starts walking off. And then he turns back, like, well, if you want to get interviewed, I advise you start walking. So then they get in the elevator, and they're just having this back and forth. She talks trash to him. She doesn't care who's around. She's just going to say what she wants to say. So while they're in the elevator, and keep in mind there are other people in there, he says to her, um, why do you think, why do you think you should work here? And she says, well, according to you, I tasted good 5 years ago. I think that qualifies me. So all the people in the elevator, they of course get out. And he's like, I don't need your bullshit. If that's what you're coming for, I don't need it. And she says, all you have around you are a bunch of yes men, people that won't look at you. They're afraid of you. She's like, I'm exactly what you need because I'm going to stand up to you. And he winds up giving her the job, but he tells her when she comes tomorrow, she needs to wear something better than what she has. She didn't show it, but it did kind of make her feel bad because this was like the nicest she kind of had because she doesn't have a lot of money. So the next day, Damon's in his office. His brother Chris comes in. They're having a discussion. Chris tells him that the coaches have told him that basically if he gets into another incident, they're going to have to think twice about renewing his contract. So he's like a really great quarterback, but they're just kind of tired of all his other issues. So apparently he's been having issues and they've been trying to keep him under wraps. And Chris hasn't wanted Damon to know about, I guess, these newer things that have come up. And now the team has reached a peak with him. And he's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I have a lot to deal with. Like, why you just can't get it together for just a little bit, So then he gets a call from reception, and she says there's some woman named Chelsea saying that you hired her. So then he's like, send her up. And so when she gets there, he notices her clothing, and he says to himself, looks like, the bottom of a bargain rack. And he tells her she's going to work directly under him. She's going to be his personal assistant. And then he decides to give her a salary that he knows is going to entice her, which means he can also get away with a lot as well because she's going to want to keep this salary. So the salary is $300,000, full benefits, which is a lot, even though they're in New York City. But that's a lot of money. So she, of course, is so ecstatic. She doesn't show anything with her face, but her legs start shaking like uncontrollably. And she says to him, I would like a contract, please. And he's like, fine, march your ass down to HR and have them whip up a contract and they can call me for verification. So when she gets up, she hugs him and then she leaves. And he's just standing there with the most confused erection ever. After Chelsea left from HR, she gets stopped by this beautiful woman. Her name's Daria. And Daria tells her, after they shake hands, that Damon's favorite color is yellow. And if she wants to get on his good side, she should basically wear it. He'll be a heck of a lot nicer to you, is what she tells Chelsea. And Chelsea's kind of like, I didn't see the color in his office or anything. And she's like, he doesn't want anyone to know. So she's like, okay, I guess I'm going to be buying some yellow clothes. So that night they have a pasta celebration. Her brother's there. Her best friend Millie's there. Millie's on the tennis circuit as well. She's trying to make a name for herself. She's trying to get into those tournaments, where she can start ranking high enough and start making some real money. So they're talking about the salary, and both Millie and Grant are like having concerns because they feel like it's a setup. And these are her same thoughts as well. She believes he's offering her that astronomical amount of money to make it harder for her to walk away, which means he can really do a lot to her and she's probably still not going to quit. So she's like, listen, I know that's what it is, but this is life-changing money And pretty much she's like, I'll put up with pretty much anything at this point, And Millie's just kind of like, okay, you just need to be careful. Damon's out to dinner with Chris. They're at some upscale restaurant and they're going over his latest scandal. He's like, you gotta stop. Like, the sponsors are threatening to pull. And he's like, we'll just get new ones. He's like, this is the second batch, Like, after this, there's nobody. And so he's got to figure out how to deal with Chris. Because Chris just doesn't want to change. He feels like, as long as I do what I'm supposed to do on the field, what I do off shouldn't matter. He's been caught doing illegal substances on camera. He licks someone's face. Like, he just does some crazy stuff. So then Chelsea comes up to the restaurant and the waiter comes over and says, there's a woman here for you. And he says, I don't know who that is. And make sure she doesn't come near us. The waiter goes back. Chelsea has daggers in her eyes. And then we find out he had told Chelsea to come to the damn restaurant. So this is him already starting that process of trying to break her. So the next day he goes into work. Everyone's in the break room. And it's because a woman named Tia, who's this golfer, but she's also an influencer with millions of followers. She's there because they're supposed to be having a meeting. So Chelsea's in there. They're chatting up. And Tia's saying, how much she loves Chelsea. And Chelsea said that you were like this great guy and all this type of stuff, whatever, and you're the greatest boss, like all this stuff, which he was not expecting, especially after what he had just done that night before. And so the woman was like, I have a charity event tonight. It's a fundraiser. Maybe we can have a couple of drinks and then talk business and bring her, So everyone leaves and he's like, I could fire you right now. And she says, but why would you? She's like, I have leverage. He's like, what do you mean? You don't have any leverage. She's like, I know what you're trying to do. I know you're trying to break me, but I'm not going to break and you're not going to fire me. So then, because if you fire me, then that takes away your whole purpose of trying to get me to break. And so then he told her to wear something decent that night. He has a driver pick her up. It's an old guy. His name's Richard, but he says, call me Dick. They have a good laugh in his car. Chelsea finds out from Dick that yellow is not his favorite color. Matter of fact, it is the color he hates the most. He's like, whoever told you that was fucking with you. So she gets to the event. She has a drink, and then someone named Mace comes up. He's got a British accent. They have some conversation. They're laughing. Damon comes up and he's like, you need to stay away from my assistant. And Mace is like, your employees can't even socialize. And he's like, not with you. And then they said something happened a long time ago. And Mace is like, you need to let it go. And he eventually walks off. Then Chris comes up and says, she who should not be named is here. Do you want me to sneak you out back? He says, no, I'm fine. She, of course, asks who it is. He wouldn't tell her. He says it's none of your concern. And then they go over and they meet with Tia. They have a good laugh but Tia's throwing herself at him like big time. She has agreed to sign with him, but she also wants to screw Damon. And she makes it very known. So they're kind of flirty with each other and Chelsea decides, I've had enough. She's like, I'm going to go to the bathroom, but I'll stop by the bar on the way there. About an hour has passed and Damon has decided to go look for her. And Chris and T are talking about his dick and he's like, I can't do this, So he gets up, goes and he sees her at the bar laughing it up with Mace. Gets over there, girl is drunk. Mace is like, she's a grown woman. She can do what she wants. He's like, but if she gets alcohol poisoning on my watch, I'm the one who's going to be sued. And I hate lawyers. So they're about to walk away. And then Chelsea yells out, you just want to put that big juicy cock in me again? And the look on Damon's face tells Mace this is clearly the truth. And he says to Chelsea, thank you for the conversation. And Mace walks off. So then Damon takes her, calls Dick, and takes her home. A guy opens the door, And he immediately gets pissed because he's thinking like she's got a guy at home and she's at the bar flirting with another man. And then the guy says, I'm her brother Grant. And he goes, oh. Then he hears a little voice, someone yelling, mommy. And they come running out and they grab her leg. And he's looking crazy, like, what the fuck? You know, she got a kid? He still wants to be an ass before he leaves. He says, make sure she shows up to work tomorrow and on time. And Grant says, you really are an asshole. So now he's got all these thoughts like swarming in his head, you know. He's wondering why she didn't tell him she had a kid. And, you know, he's trying to make sense of well, it makes sense now why she was so happy about the job, but now he wants to know who the father of the kid is. He wants more information, and he's mad because he's not supposed to want to know this stuff, but he does. He, of course, is thinking in his head, this is not going to be another Trish situation, so we got to find out what in the heck happened with Trish. She gets to work. He puts her desk in the middle of the office. Like, other people have partitions and things separating them, but he puts her smack dab in the middle, just out in the open. Clearly, it's punishment. She knows it. She talks to Millie, and Millie's like, well, talk to him about it, If you think he's punishing you, go in his office and talk to him. So she goes in his office and she catches his screen, and it's got a picture of her social media. She's like, what are you looking at me for? He's like, I need to learn. No, he tells her, you need to learn how to knock. She says, no, you need to answer my question. Why are you looking me up on social media? He says, you have a daughter. I wasn't expecting that. And she's like, what does that have to do with anything? I don't have to tell you everything about my life. He's like, you're my employee, and I have to know about my employees. And he's like, is the father still in her life? And she says it's complicated. And so then he changes the subject. He starts telling her this story about Skittles, how he used to take one, squish it against the other one, and he would keep doing it until he could keep the strongest one. The strongest one was a green Skittle that never broke. And then he eventually learned just to enjoy the Skittles. And she's like, so basically you're telling me you were a psychopath even as a kid? He's like, no, I'm telling you to go back to work. We get a little backdrop and we find out that he took on Chris when Chris first got into the league because he saw a bunch of vultures coming in at him. And he wanted to protect his brother. And he also wants to protect other people and when they come into this, different lines of business so that they won't fall prey to other people. And he tries to help as much as he can. He's not really in it for the money. He really is in it to help people. But he'll never tell anyone that because he needs people to think that he's ruthless. He's only about the money, that he's not soft. It's late this night. It's after midnight. Chelsea comes in. She's finally finished what he had requested. He's like, it took you that long? She says, yeah, I didn't know how to use Excel. I had to watch a bunch of tutorials. And then when I went down to the stupid printer, there was no ink, so I had to go across town to get the right one. And he took the paperwork she gave me, he threw it in the trash. And she's like, did you just throw that in the trash can? So then Chris is in there, and he's looking crazy because he's like, wow, why did you do that, And he tells Chris it's none of your concern. He's like, you have enough with your own stuff. And she leaves, and he asks Chris, have you fixed the situation with your coach? And he of course hasn't fixed it. Chris hasn't. Part of Damon does feel like he might have just taken it too far with Chelsea. So Chelsea's outside. She's waiting in the rain. No, I'm sorry. She's waiting for the rain to stop. And Damon comes down and he's like, what are you doing? She's like, well, it's raining cats and dogs and I really can't go anywhere. And he's like, come with me. She's like, nope. He's like, either you come with me or I'm going to carry you over my shoulder like a caveman. And she eventually agrees to go with him. And they get in the car, they have a little conversation, and she winds up giving him advice about the brother and was like, just get him someone to pretend to be his fiance. At the same time, their job is to keep him away from drugs and stuff like that, and it'll look like he's settling down. And he had to admit, like, shoot, that actually does sound like a good idea. They get to, well, I think it's actually her apartment. Her brother lives with her. He walks her to the door. She asks him if he wants to come in for coffee. He's like, it's after midnight. She's like, you can get decaf. He's like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. And she says, um, what are you afraid you're going to come in and fall in love? And he says, you have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow. And she, of course, is feeling a little fester in her stomach, and she knows this is dangerous. So Damon is having lunch with his parents. He sends Chelsea on what he thinks is going to be an impossible task, which is to have Chelsea come to the restaurant where he's with his parents. And by golly, she pulls it off. And she tells him, I got her here because I told her you were going to take her on a date. And then she walks off. And when Chelsea left, she's thinking in her head, kind of like, for some reason, that might not have been the best thing to do. And of course, it's shocking to Damon. And he, of course, is like, you know what? One date won't hurt, you know? And he, of course, is like, this could very well much be a problem. So Chelsea's giving tennis lessons, which is one of her gigs. She still hasn't gotten paid. She's like a week away from her payday. And so she's got to kind of keep up her hustles. She's not really paying attention. She wants to know what's going on with this date. So she's mad at herself for pushing it. And she's mad at herself for wanting to know. So she calls the driver Dick. He comes, gets her. She asks him, do you know where he normally takes his dates? He's like, yep. So he gets her, takes her, and we get a little backdrop about how he hired Dick. So he used to be in the front of the building begging for change. And he put him to work. I was like, oh, wow. See, he really does have a heart of gold. You can tell. He really does. So Dick does go into just a little detail, and he just kind of says how Trish, really messed him up, took half his clients. She really fucked him over. But he wouldn't go into more detail. She didn't want to keep pushing because she didn't want him to feel like he was, violating his boss's trust. So they find out where he's taken Tia, and all rationale is out the window with her. It's gone. Damon is actually having a good conversation with Tia. He doesn't want to fuck her, but he is impressed that she has a plan. She's trying to leverage everything she has right now so she can set up a solid foundation when she's done with sports and when her beauty fades. She wants to make sure she's still going to be okay. And he realizes she really would be a good fit for the company. And she could definitely take over that top spot that Chris is now holding on to. And then he sees Chelsea. Chelsea's ass is in pajama bottoms, looking a hot mess, flailing her arms at the maitre d'. And so she comes over to the table finally, and she's like, there's an emergency at the office. And he's like, what? She's like, there's an emergency at the office, and you need to get there. So he gets up from Tia. She's upset because she's like, you're going to leave in the middle of our date? And he's like, well, just think of it as a positive. Nothing comes before business. He puts some money on the table. He sees a very calculating look in her eyes, but he's like, I'll just have to unpack that later, and he leaves. They get outside, and Chelsea confesses nothing's going on at the office. She's like, I don't know why I did it. When she had made the comment that she had got the information from Dick, he thought, you fucked somebody? And she's like, no. But at the same time, he's thinking in his head, like, why would that bother me so much? It's funny that they both are sitting up here acting like they don't know why the fuck this is bothering them. I'm like, really? You know exactly why. But he tells her, I didn't get to eat, so unless you want me to fire you, you need to get me something to eat. So they call Dick and they go to a diner to have breakfast. He didn't get the right pancakes, no waffles. And she thought he was going to blow a gasket, but he didn't. He was super nice. And she's like, she was shocked, that he was like that. And he says, I used to work in service, and He's like, I have really a soft spot for people like that, And she's kind of like, you hire homeless guys, you're nice to customer service people, like, who are you, And he says, people that are mean to people that work in customer service deserve a special place in hell. um, they have a little conversation. She said something to him about the gossip in the office. Apparently he hasn't been in a relationship in a long time. And she's like, what happened? Did someone hurt you? And she's like, that's life. People hurt you, but you shouldn't close yourself off because of that. And he's like, well, you can't be too great at it either. He's like, you had a kid. Where's the father? She gets upset and pissed off and walks off. And she said something to him about, he was being such an asshole. But I'm just kind of like, this is the problem with people. They want to be able to judge you, but then say, you know, you can't say anything back to me. You know what I'm saying? I don't like that. Then keep your opinions to yourself. If you don't want someone to be able to unleash on you, don't unleash on them. They're in a meeting the next day. The window cleaner was like drawing hearts on the window, and then wiping them off. And he's looking at Chelsea while he's doing it. And this, of course, pisses off Damon. He goes and closes the window and says there's a glare. And they're like, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and the sun's facing west. Like, what are you talking about? And he realizes he is a lot more affected by her than he's supposed to. So then Chelsea one day winds up having to bring Luna to work because it's a day off at the daycare and her brother can't watch her. So she has her underneath her desk. She has on headphones and gave her phone, and that's keeping her preoccupied. She came in a little earlier before everyone else did, and so far it's kept her busy for about 3 hours. Daria, she confronts her, and Daria's like, you shouldn't be so gullible. And I'm just like, wow. So we realize she's probably just a bitch, or she just has a weird sense of humor. And so she gets a message from Damon saying that he needs her to find these organic snacks for someone in an hour. And she says to Luna, like, can you be good to me if I leave you with one of my coworkers? And she said, okay, I'll be good for one person. And then she points to someone that Chelsea doesn't know. And she's like, I can't leave you with someone I don't know. And then she points to a man. And yes, it's Damon. He comes over, but he doesn't freak out. He just says, you need to get going. He's like, I can watch it for you. That's no problem. So Luna and Damon have such a really cute exchange. And she's mesmerized by him. It was a really cute scene to read. So then Damon and Luna, they're having a great time. They're playing on on his floor. And Chelsea walks in and sees it, and she's shocked. Her heart melts. And then he tells her she can take the rest of the day off. He's like, did you get everything? Go ahead and take the rest of the day. So he's not being an ass. Next day, Damon comes and tells her they've got to take a trip to Savannah for the weekend for work. She, of course, is like, I can't do that. I can't pay, for a sitter, and I can't pay I can't ask my brother to watch Luna for that long. I can't afford it. I still haven't got my first check. And he says, I'll take care of it. He was like, but if you want your job, you got to go. So he's going to cut a check for $2,000 because she had to cancel her other side gigs as well. So besides tennis, she also bartends. So I was like, well, shoot, he's like, that should cover it. It's probably, I guarantee you, a lot more than what she would have actually made. So then on the plane, she starts to freak out. She doesn't like heights. She has this fear of, she has a fear of falling. So she starts coming up with all these different scenarios, and he's trying to calm her down. That was a funny scene to read. They get to the hotel. There, of course, has been a mix-up. She was supposed to be in room 318. He was supposed to be in room 317 because that's his lucky number. But there's some event going on, and they mixed up the rooms, and so now there's only one room available, and it's 317, and they're in it together. So he tells her, "You'll take the bed, I'll take the couch." And she's like, "Are you serious? Or are you just gonna make me take the couch later?" Like, she was just prepared for him to do something stupid, you know. And he's like, "No, I'm not gonna do that to you." So then he goes and takes a shower. He comes out. She, of course, while he's in there taking a shower, she's having fantasies. And he comes out, he's going for a run. And she's like, "Well, why did you do that? Like, why not go for a run and then take a shower?" And he doesn't like airplane germs. He's like, "I don't want that running in my mouth when I sweat." So then she's like, "Well, let me come with you." He's like, "Nah." And she's like, "What, are you scared I'm going to beat you?" And he says, "All right, you can come, but I'm not slowing down for you." She hasn't done any running in a long time, so of course this kicks her whole ass. They get back to the room, and he's like, "Tell me your story." And so she says, she talked about how her brother had gotten in trouble early on, and her parents had kicked him out. She didn't agree with their decision, and then the parents started taking stuff away from her. They stopped paying for her tennis lessons, and then about 2 years after they had initially kicked out the brother, then they kicked her out. And he's like, "So what were you really doing there that day at that hotel?" And she says, "I was trying to get into a meeting to see if I could possibly get some type of sponsorship, which would allow me to play in those bigger tournaments. And I figure if I can get in with something as big as the Olympics, that would set me up." And he's like, "Damn, that was a pretty good idea." She's like, "I'm not as dumb as you think I am." And he's like, "I don't think you're dumb." So they're looking at each other, they're hot and heavy, and he tells her that he has a position for her, which is why he wanted her to come down this weekend. He wants her to start scouting for talent. And she can get 10% of whatever the percentage is of, what that person brings in. And with their sponsorships and stuff like that. And she, of course, is super ecstatic. She hugs him. And that's when they're looking at each other like, full like, "Oh my gosh." And he tells her, "We can't do this." And she's like, "Why not? We're adults." He's like, "I'm your boss. We don't need to do this." And she's like, "It's your company, so who are you going to get in trouble with? Like, who do you have to answer to?" So he kept saying, "No, I'm no good for you," and all this type of stuff. And she's like, "I'm not asking you to marry me. This is purely physical." And so she's like, "You want it, I want it. So she's like, "But I need to shower first." So he takes her into the shower, and she's like, no, he says to her, "As long as you're in this room, you're going to be my play toy." And she says, "I didn't expect you to be someone who liked to play with toys." And all he could think of was like, she is not going to leave her personality at the door ever. He takes her in the shower. He winds up washing her off. She had told him, "There's no condom. You're not putting that thing inside of me." So then they're kissing, and she winds up sucking him off, which is something she normally doesn't like to do, but she wanted to do it to him, and so she did it. And then he's like, "I need to be inside you." And she's like, "But you were just inside me." And so then he's like, "I want to be inside your pussy." And so then he took her to the room, and they wind up having this hardcore session. And in her head, she's telling herself, "It's just sex, it's just sex." But it felt so far beyond that. And she knew she was fucked literally and figuratively after. So they go and eat lunch, and he tells her that he's supposed to meet with Trevor Castle, who apparently is not like the next Roger Federer. And so she, of course, gets excited because, she knows who's up and coming when it comes to tennis. And he hadn't planned on letting her come. And she's like, "Well, why wouldn't you let me?" And he's thinking about the fact that Castle has a history of, a love him and leave him type in every city. And that protectiveness is kicking in. Protectiveness, jealous, that sounds more befitting. But he decides she can come. He's like, "But you need better clothes." And she's like, "Well, I need money for that." He gave her the company credit card. And she's like, "Well, would you come with me?" And he's like, "Why would I do that?" She's like, "Because you can come in the dressing room with me." And he's like, "Oh, help me God." But he went. So while they're in the dressing room, he winds up fingering her. And then he gets a text message from Trish saying, "I know you're not down here in Savannah to try and poach Trevor Castle away from me." And we find out that apparently there's something she still has over his head. We don't know what it is, but for whatever reason, he walks a really fine line when it comes to her. He does not want whatever secret she has revealed. And so he's getting tired of it, and he's almost willing to let whatever it is come out so she can stop holding over his head. Also, I forgot to mention this earlier. We found out that he met Trish a couple of months after his meeting with Chelsea, after that hookup. So I'm like, They're at dinner with Trevor. Conversation's going really well. Her and Trevor are going back and forth. He remembers her from before. Um, Damon, of course, is not liking this. She can see in the corner of her eye that he's looking pissy. And then she has to go to the restroom. She excuses herself and she runs into Trish. Trish, of course, is like, I know that's not Damon out there with my client. And she says, well, he's no one's client right now. And Trish says, I might have to remind Damon that he's my bitch. And I'm like, oh, shoot. And Trish says, before she walks away, she's like, don't let him put his dick in you because you have no idea where it's been. And she walks off. So Chelsea goes to the restroom. She comes out. Trevor's waiting there for her. And he asked her if after dinner if she would be open to having drinks. And she was saying, thank you, but I don't think that's a good idea. But before she could get the rest out, Damon pops up. He's pissed. He, of course, is like, you can't my employee just go to the restroom? And Trevor was like, oh, I didn't know you two had a thing. And he got like slick with him with it. And he made a comment like, I didn't know you like to bring little toys to fuck while you travel. Just some crazy shit. So Damon jacked him up. Chelsea had to tell him to stop. And they, of course, knew that was over as far as with Trevor. But he didn't care. Damon said to her after Trevor walked off, he's like, you're mine. He's like, and I thought I was never going to see you again. And the idea of not being able to touch you is just not going to work for me. And so then she winds up kissing him. And she tells him about what happened with Trish. He brushes it off. He said, she'll say anything to fuck with me. And she's like, is that it? And he said, yeah. And that pissed her off. And her thought process was, if he can't be open with her, then she feels she can't trust him to tell him about Luna. Now that I do not agree with, and the whole thing with that I feel is just so fucked up. That's his child that you made a decision to keep away from him, and now you're trying to use him not telling you something. Oh, that's reason enough for me not to tell him about his kid. Come on, stop trying to use a cop-out. That's fucking trash. The next morning it's cold between the two of them. Trish had text Damon, was like, can we meet in the morning to talk? So they're meeting for breakfast. He goes down. She comes. He's already in his head comparing the two. Trish looks like she spent hours trying to get ready. Chelsea's not that type. And he's like, okay, I need to stop that, So then Trish sits down and she's like, basically, you're the one that started this. You knew I was courting Trevor. And, so why would you even do it? Like, why would you even try and poach him? And she, of course, was like, you're not, what did she say? He made a comment. He basically told her like what Chelsea said. And she was like, oh, I knew your new blondie was going to run back and tell you what I said. And he's like, we're in the same field. We're eventually going to be, caught between the same people, right? We're going to court some of the same people. He's like, we should be able to be professional and civilized. And then she drops a bomb and tells him, I want you back. She says, we were good together and I want it. And he tells her, after all the destruction that you did, I gave you everything you wanted. Do you seriously think I would take you back? And she says, you were a whole man when you were with me, and now you're just a shell of a man. And I was like, damn. And he says to her, that's not going to happen. She, of course, was like, Blondie doesn't know all your secrets. And he says, if you do anything to try to come between me and Chelsea, you'll regret it. That pissed her off. And she said, why should she have you? I'm like, damn, this bitch is bold. Like, dang. And she a little cray cray probably too. And then he walks off and he wonders, like, did he just fuck up and just, put this woman on a path of pure destruction? And I'm like, yeah, she's probably gonna try and fully destroy you now. So then Chelsea wakes up. She sees Damon's gone. She's thinking, of course, like, he's probably with Trish. They're probably hooking up, planning some type of hookup. So she goes downstairs and she, of course, runs into Trish. Trish, Trish, I can't even talk. Trish, of course, gives her complete bullshit, tells her that he wanted to meet up, that he wants her back, and that she's considering it, and that they're going to meet up tonight for dinner. Just nothing but lies. And Chelsea knew this. And I was like, good. She didn't just fall for the bullshit, She wanted Damon to know that she did trust him. She felt like maybe if I let him know that I trust him, he'll open up to me, So that's what she did. She went over to the table. He, of course, is like, how did you know I was, here? And she basically told him all the stuff that Trish had said. And she's like, told him, I trust you, and he decides to tell her. So he says that he met Trish a couple of months after their one time, him and Chelsea's. He was trying to fill a void. And even though he saw signs that Chelsea was, wasn't any good, he kept trying to fill the void that was left after he had been with Chelsea. And he kept trying to prove his affection to her by giving her more power, giving her more information. And unfortunately, she knew a couple secrets. The first one is that when he first started out, he didn't have all the right credentials in business. He, of course, has them now. He got that fixed. But the first couple of years, he didn't. And, of course, that would be a very big issue. And it could lose him everything. She also knows that the real reason why he does what he does is because he wants to help people. He's not chasing money. It really is about the fact of being able to help people not be preyed upon by vultures. He wants to be able to help those people. And she's like, you don't have to worry about it. You have me now. I'm a problem fixer. You're not doing this alone. And in her mind, she's like, she knows she's got to tell him about Luna, but she just doesn't know when to do it. Damon and Chelsea go for a walk. Chelsea even reaches and holds his hand. And even though he's not one of those type of people, he did enjoy having her hand in his. They sit down and she tells him, I got to tell you something. And she spills it all out. She tells him that he's her father, Luna's father, and the reason she didn't tell him was because she thought he was a bad person and that he might use his money to make her do something she didn't want to do. So he thought she was going to try and make her get rid of it or make her give it up, and she didn't want to chance it. And she had convinced herself that she had done the right thing, but she was really sorry for keeping this from him. And he's like slowly catching up to what she's saying, and his head spinning. And he's like, she's mine? He's like, I wore a condom. She said, yeah, but it broke. And he tells her, no, she says, I know you're probably going to hate me, but she is yours. And he's like, I need time to process this. He said he gave her the key to the room, and he said, I'll send the plane tickets to you in the morning. And he left. So Chelsea's home. It's Monday morning. She hasn't heard from him since he walked away from her. Her friend Millie comes over, and Millie's like, I mean, what do you want him to say? What advice do you want me to give, especially if you're going to ignore it? And she's like, right now I could use whatever you're willing to give me. And Millie says, you threw a lot at him. Give him time to process, And then Millie leaves, and she's terrified. Thoughts have run through her mind that he's going to yank Luna away from her. she's had some crazy thoughts. So, I mean, I don't think they're that crazy. You did deny him 5 years, so yeah, I guess maybe you should have that fear that he's just going to yank the child away from you. Not that it would be right, but it's not right what you did either. So Damon's at work. Chris comes in and says he's possibly about to make a mistake, but he's still going to do it anyway. And Damon's like, listen, I don't have time for you. He's like, have you just considered not doing it? He's like, I got too much on my mind. So Chris leaves. Chelsea comes in. She's looked at him like 5 times. He's getting ready to go talk to her. And because she's at her desk. I'm sorry, she didn't come in the office. She went to her desk. And he goes to talk to her, but he gets stopped. And it's Daria, and she's like, there's a surprise for you in the break room. And so he goes, and it's Tia, and she's doing like some type of strip tease, pops up, pops out, grabs his face, and kisses him. And she says, you've been playing hard to get. And of course, that's when Chelsea walks in just in time to see this. And she just says, oh. Chelsea runs off. He, of course, goes after her. He's like, it's not what you think. Um, he's like, she kissed me. And he was like, I was that close to her because I was trying to get her to stop from pulling her dress off. And she's like, is that the truth? And he says, yes. And he tells her, yes, you should have told me so that I could have helped you. I would have loved to have met my daughter a lot sooner, than 5 years. But he doesn't feel like there was malicious intent on her part. And I guess for him, that's what it comes back to, intent. They're now on their way to meet Luna, like officially as this is her dad. And Chelsea's nervous. Dick the driver tries to give them some comic relief. It doesn't work. They're both still nervous. They get out. Grant comes out. Luna runs into Chelsea's arm. Grant is looking all skeptical at Damon. And he's just like, is the check gonna clear when she gets paid? So Chelsea's like, give us a moment. Grant leaves. And then they tell Luna, well, actually, Damon tells her, I'm your father. She, of course, is like, really? You two bump bellies? Because that's how her mother described how babies were made. And he tells her, like, yeah. And he's like, I'm your father. And she just says, hi. And she wraps her arms around his neck and gave him a hug and said hi back. I thought that was so sweet. So they go to work. She winds up going to HR, and he pays her out the amount, she gets it earlier for the assistant position, and then the paperwork for the new promotion, which she actually had put in that Friday before they left for Savannah, and that made her happy. And then she left. She went to his office. He's looking at pink scooters. He wanted to know which one to get Luna, and he was very clear with her. He's like, I want us to be a family. Basically everyone's gonna know we together. It's you and me. He's like, if somebody flirts, I will abuse my power to fire them. I'm like, dang. And she didn't want to like it, but she did like it when he said it. And he invited her on a real date that night. He's like, we do really need to actually spend time together and get to know one another. So she's getting trained by a woman named Jane. Damon's watching. Chris is in his office. They're having a conversation, and Chris is noticing how he smiles when he sees Chelsea. And he is like, I knew it. He's like, oh my gosh, you really like her. You stop being so grumpy all the time. And he told him, don't be so mean, that type of thing. And Damon's like, I'm not taking any advice from you. Like, really? And Chris is like, I have experience with women. My problem is I'm addicted to the first part, the getting to know part. Then after that, I get bored. And I'm just like, at least he's honest. He knows why he's like that. Self-awareness. That's what matters. So then he sees one of the reps, David, helping her because she had dropped some papers, and the guy's like staring at her butt, and he got pissed, went out, told David, don't you have a deal you need to be closing? He's trying to get him away from her fast. He comes and picks her up and he brings her, not flowers, he brings her like herbs and stuff from a garden. He's like, I figure you could use them if you made like roasted potatoes or something. So then she takes him upstairs. She comes back down and they're walking after Dick picks him up, and they go to this court, and it's Trevor Castle and Edgar, two of like the best tennis players, playing a match. And so I guess this is their second chance to woo them. So Trevor comes up, and she at first was like, I thought this was a date. And he said, it's your first test. You got to learn how to multitask, when you do this job. And she's like, okay. So she's watching him play. And this is before they came up. He's touching her between her legs. She's freaking out. She's like, I can't concentrate when you start touching me. After the match, they talk with Trevor and Edgar, and then Trish and Tia walk up. And it just so happens now Tia is going to be working with Trish because she's pissed off at Damon for not screwing her. And he was just kind of shocked. He's like, it really came down to that, you know? And so he says to Trish, like, what is this really about? And she says, I want everything you have because you don't deserve it. And I'm going to take it from you until I feel that I've been satisfied. So she's just a cruel piece of shit. So then Chelsea comes over. He's walking off. She's upset because she's like ready to throw down, They go up to the carriage house to have their date. And she tells him, listen, I really need to know what happened between the two of you. Like the complete story. And he tells her him and Trish were actually married. So 5 years ago, so a couple of months after he had his tryst with Chelsea, he had been looking for something. He had been trying to fill that void. And he poured himself into Trish. They got married in like a couple of months. And she thought, Chelsea was like, did you hate me that much? And he's like, no, I didn't hate you. You made me feel something that I hadn't felt before, which means it opened a door. And I wanted to try and get that feeling again, And so he's like, and when you came back, it's just kind of like when you think you're never going to see this person again, and then boom, they're back. He's like, there's just no way I can go without being with you, And it shocks her, his honesty, but hey, he was being real with her. And she's like, I want you to, whatever that means. So they have dinner. After that, they go up to the room. They have a nice sensual session. He came on her stomach because she's like, you better not get me pregnant again. They settle into a routine. They spend a lot of time together. He's gotten a lot of stuff at his place for Luna. She's gotten a bigger place for her and Luna, so everything's going really good. They have a staff meeting, and they're talking about the Trevor and Tia situation. So them leaving, it's going to be like 40% down because of it. And so Chelsea has an idea. She's like, what we need to do is lean into the real reason for why you do this, which is to help people. So she had this whole plan mapped out. Everyone loved it. He was so proud of her. And I thought that was really good, that he was going to lean into what motivates him, And I think this is so smart for so many reasons. First of all, opening yourself up to a new portion of business. And you can't depend on Chris. He gets in trouble too much, right? So he can't be your bread and butter forever. So you got to figure out another way to to reinvent your business anyway. So this way you're actually helping people. So then Luna and Chelsea, they're waiting for Damon for a lunch date. He comes up. And then Trish walks by. She, of course, is like, you are so stupid for doing what you're doing. People are going to think you're weak. And he says, I don't really care about that, He's like, we're taking our business into a new direction. And that's when he starts to tell her that he's had his accountants looking into her finances. And there's been some discrepancies. She turns red. She starts getting more and more upset. And he's like, and if that information were to ever come to light, if your clients were to know that you've been embezzling from them, I don't think that would go over too well. So then she's like, who did you talk to? And he knew he had her. She storms off calling someone. We find out they didn't even have any concrete evidence. They were just bluffing to see her reaction. And so her reaction just proved that she's been doing this bullshit all along. So a few days later, it's all across the press. Trish Jameson has been embezzling. Reporters are coming after her. She's trying to cover her face. Chelsea is absolutely loving it. She had Damon read her the article twice. And her two highest clients, Tia and Trevor, they're having a hard time seeking agencies as well, because apparently it's been leaked about their sexual harassment claims. So I find it very befitting for them, because they were awful people too. So I'm like, I don't feel bad at all. So it's been about a month later. Everything's going really well. They're outside. She's having a glass of wine. He grabs her and he says, I think I love you. And she says, no, think, you better, you better be sure. So then they exchanged their I loves you. It was really cute and special. Sometime has passed. Chelsea's now a full-fledged agent. She has her own office. She's doing great. Her and Damon took Lily to the fair. They both had really fond memories when they were younger of going to the fair, and so they wanted to have her experience that. She loved it. They went on the ferry, and Luna says, are you going to give mommy another baby? And Chelsea says, no, we don't need to talk about that right now. And Damon says, I would, but it would only be proper if I married mommy first. And Luna's like, well, you didn't marry mommy when you put me in her belly. He says, true. And then he took out a ring, and Chelsea's like, is that what I think it is? Yes. And Luna's like, he didn't ask you, mommy. So then he tells her, marry me. And Luna says, that's not nice, Daddy. You got to actually ask her. So then he asks her, will you marry me? And she says yes. And they have this super sweet moment. And that is how it ends. I thought this was so cute. I thought it was an adorable read. I think I am probably going to read the other books in this series. I'm just not going to review them. But I think this is a great starter. And for you guys to go and read the other books as well. Let me know what you guys think. Drop down in the comment section and let me know. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook or journal, I do have those on sale, and the links will be available down below in the description section. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, I truly do thank you all for your support, and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.